In this lesson, we'll begin drawing the tread and risers for our staircase. Alright, welcome to our course in creating a stair detail in AutoCAD. So what we have on our screen here is a floor plan that we're going to use, one, to get the ball rolling for our project. We'll actually use information from right here to get our detail generated, but I also have a few notes to kind of help us understand the scope of the project and some of the measurements I'll be using and where I'm getting those. So I'm just going to scroll in a little bit, and some of the things we'll be really focusing on are going to be the most common things you'll run into, or code issues you'll run into. So we're going to run into issues with the required dimensions for our risers and treads, height of handrails, the diameter of our handrails, our stairway width, our width and depth of our landing, the railway extensions both at the top and the bottom of our stairway, headroom, and also what happens to our staircase if we are going from point A to point B and that distance is greater than 12 feet. I also have a couple of notes here to kind of help me along with my detail. They left me a note here to let me know what kind of stringers I'm using, which will basically be our C channels. It'll be exactly 8 inches deep, but the thickness of that will actually, or the gauge will be about 1/4 inch thick. And the beams underneath the landing will be 12 inches deep, with a 1/4 inch thickness. So we'll kind of keep some of these things in mind as we're going, and I'll kind of refer back to this just to kind of let you know exactly where I got the measurements. And this will help kind of reinforce some of the thoughts and decision making behind how we're going to actually draw out this staircase. So as I mentioned, we're going to start out with our riser and our tread. So by code, we have to have a certain basic dimension for our risers, and our risers can't exceed 7 inches. So I'm going to go with 6 inches because it's easy to do the math, especially when you have a pretty even floor height. In our case, which is 14 feet, is what we're actually going from point A to point B. Our tread, which is basically that surface that we'll be stepping on, it's going to be 12 inches. Again, that's for easy math. A lot of times you'll see it at 11 inches, but for, help me with my math and really help us with this example and make things pretty clear-cut and easy to understand, I'm choosing these two dimensions. So in this lesson, we'll actually work with these two dimensions primarily. So here's our floor plan, and I'll kind of zoom out just a little bit here. And this is basically the placement of our where our stairs are going to go. We've been given this floor plan. It's basically a shell of a building. We have the exterior as well as the structural members holding up the building, and all we need to do is detail out the stairs that are going in. Looking at this, I know the direction. We're actually going to be traveling up, going this way, up to the second floor. Looks like I have some structural members kind of framed out around, and that's probably because the floor will actually be cut open at this area, so it'll actually be framed out with some steel around that way. Here's a little section cut, and when I go down to the section cut, this is that area. And as I mentioned, we've got level 1, level 2, and our job is to get from level 1 to level 2, and that distance is actually going to be 14 feet. So you're starting to get an understanding of what we need for this project. Now, earlier, when I go back up here to our notes here, I mentioned a little bit about what happens when we have a vertical rise greater than 12 feet. And that's actually what we have in our situation here. Ours is actually 14 feet. So what happens is we have to actually create a landing, and we're going to learn how to do that within this course. So that's another thing we're going to have to actually think about as we're building this out. So let's go ahead and get started with our tread and risers. And to do that, I'm just going to use what I was given and use that as a reference to get the ball rolling. So I know when I look at this in plan view, I have plenty of information to go with here. I know that looking down, I know the width of my tread, which is going to be 12. I know how many steps I have, which will be this amount of steps here. But I also know that I have a landing right here, as well as the width of my landing and the depth of my landing. So this is going to be a perfect opportunity for me to get this thing drawn. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to grab all the lines I can here, and I'm just going to grab several at once, and I'm going to use all these lines as a template or reference lines basically to get my tread and risers in place. So I'm going to copy these. I'm going to make sure my ortho's on, and I'm just going to bring these guys down straight to my project, and making sure I land perpendicular to my surface. That way I get the positioning exactly right. Perfect. So now really it's just a matter of knowing exactly what I'm looking at here, but also drawing in my rise and run, which in our case, as I mentioned, is 6 and 12. So I'm going to use a polyline to get that accomplished. So we'll go with polyline. And the reason why I'm doing that is because a little bit later we'll actually take what we drew, and since we will have a flight of stairs going up one, a landing, and another flight, we'll actually use polylines to create the first flight, and that'll make it much easier to copy and take what we have for the first flight and just run it up to the second flight, which will actually get us up to the second floor. So let's simply draw in those risers. So I'm going to start at this point down here, and I'm just going to go up in this direction, 6 inches, and I'm just going to run straight over. And I'm just going to keep this process going. So we'll go up 6, and we'll go perpendicular. We'll go up 6, and we'll go perpendicular. And basically this is all I'm going to do the whole way through until I get to the halfway point of my stairs. So I'll kind of stop here, but I'll finish this out. So in the next lesson, you'll actually see that first flight finished. But we know the amount of stairs we need to get, so I'm going to basically keep on doing this, going up 6 and just over perpendicular till I hit this line, until I get to this line right here, and this will be the start of my landing. So in the next lesson, I'll go ahead and have this finished out for us, and then we'll go on to the next step of our process, and then we'll start adding some stringers as well as the form for our landing.